Okay. So if you weren't sure already, being from this territory, I have a modern day map of the traditional territory of the Lekwungen speaking peoples, the Songhees and Esquimalt Nations. It's a really good map just to get perspective on the area that we're talking about. So you can see here the all of Greater Victoria and a line through Cordova Bay and into San Juan Island and the Strait of Harrow. This is all considered Lekwungen speaking territory, Lekwungen territory of the Songhees and Esquimalt Nations. And this is right off of the website, the Songhees website. And it really correlates to some of the old maps as well that we see, some of the more historical maps that map out the territory and describe the different traditional locations, the village sites, the reef net fishing sites, some of the cultural sites around the region. So just to give you a perspective, this is the area that we're talking about today. Joanne.
And this acknowledgement that you see in front of you is something that our department borrowed from some work from out of Australia. And we really like it because it brings into the acknowledgement relationships to families and to communities and to the land. It also reminds people that Indigenous folks have always been educating their children, and the education stems from the land and the gifts that come from the land or the resources that come from the land. So we really like this this broader acknowledgement, and but it's still a little bit of a work in progress.
I just wanted to give you another example of a personalized acknowledgement, and I've seen kind of a neat trend where organizations, groups are starting to really take the acknowledgements to heart and personalize them a little bit more and make them their own. And so I want to read you one. Some of you may be familiar with this if you're hockey fans. This one comes from the NHL, from the Chicago Blackhawks. So I want to read this for you. The Chicago Blackhawks acknowledge that the team, its foundation, and the spaces we maintain, work, and compete within stand upon the traditional homelands of the Miami, Sauk, Fox, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, and the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi First Nations. We understand that this land holds immense significance for its original stewards, the Native nations, and the peoples of this region. We would also like to recognize that our team's namesake, Sauk War Leader Blackhawk, serves as a continuous reminder of our relationship to the Native American communities we live amongst and draw inspiration from. I thought that was really cool when I saw that. Even though I'm not a big fan of the Blackhawks, I liked that acknowledgement. So, and I just wanted to get into what is an acknowledgement and why do we do it? So, territorial acknowledgements are rooted in First Nations protocols and guide us in how we interact and respect one another. Providing a territorial acknowledgement is a way for us as visitors to thank and acknowledge the caretakers of the places where we work, live, and play. A territorial acknowledgement is an opportunity to recognize our connection and our responsibilities to one another. So this is from the indigenization website at Camosun. And I really love this because it brings in a little bit of responsibility. It's not just about checking the box of an acknowledgement at the beginning of a presentation, but actually about the commitment or the responsibility that we share and when we make those acknowledgements. And why do we acknowledge? And this comes from the website as well, and I really love this, that Indigenous voice and presence has been hidden and marginalized for too long. We are now seeing a resurgence and reclaiming of indigeneity and self-determination. Acknowledging territory is a component of the process of indigenization, decolonization, and reconciliation, providing the foundation to rebuild trusting and just relationships. So some of you may have heard a traditional welcome, like I did at the beginning of this presentation. Oftentimes welcomes are given by an elder or a knowledge keeper from the territory where the event is happening. In my work with Butch, he let me know that it would be okay to use a welcome to the territory because of the work that I do on behalf of the nations, oftentimes. So I hold that with a lot of honor. And welcomes are meant to meet or greet visitors with a good heart, good mind, and good feeling. So land-based rooted in Indigenous pedagogy. Um, so I spent a little time, kind of working this through in my mind about the difference between land-based learning and place-based learning. And there's some really good research around it, but land-based learning really is rooted in Indigenous pedagogy. And we look at this quote here from Mandy Raels, and I just love this. And she poses some questions out of this, that land-based pedagogy is the progressive teacher that will provide us the tools to build healthy communities with sustainable futures. How can we how can we better teach empathy, instill responsibility, and be examples of honorable human reciprocation, history, survival skills? Land-based education offers higher levels of thinking not always found in traditional Western education, from harvesting plant medicines to gardening and learning to track animals. There is a plethora of lessons to take from every season. There are no textbooks. Instead, we learn to read with the land with our senses. So I went and just took a moment to answer each one of those questions. We talk about empathy for each other and all living things, particularly our relationships to food and food systems that sustain us, like salmon, herring, shellfish, deer, elk, camas, and berries. Those are only a couple to name a few. Responsibility to be good stewards of the land and the waters. Reciprocity in our relationships with one another, and to not take from the land without giving back. Learning authentic Indigenous history of places to reshape the colonial narrative, and survival skills to maintain our connection to the past and the ways of our ancestors, to enrich our appreciation of the delicate balance of ecosystems and our human dependence upon them to ensure a sustainable future. So when I think about those questions and I think about land-based learning and what that means to me, those are the thoughts that come to my mind. And that's what I hopefully convey when I'm working with students on the land. So much of this work that we do in Indigenous education is really rooted in consultation with community, with elders. Butch Dick is one of the members of our Elders Advisory Council, and we go to him often with questions or queries, or advice. And in this case, there was a particular quote that I picked out of the Lekwungen video. So on our website, there's a video called Lekwungen, Place to Smoke Herring, and it's about 10 minutes long, and it's a beautiful um, uh, portrayal of this territory from a bird's eye view. A lot of it's done with drone work. It has Bradley Dick, Butch, Skip Dick as well, and they're just speaking to the territory, and it's just so masterfully done. So if you haven't had a chance to see it, please visit our website and have a look at that. But there's a point in the film where he says the most important thing you can do is learn everything you can about Lekwungen people, because this is their land. And I absolutely loved that, and I picked that out for an earlier presentation just as a slide on its own, and it really was the inspiration for this film. And so what I wanted to do was go and have this work really be grounded in a message from one of our local elders. And so I went to Butch and asked him a series of questions, and this was the result. Just making sure you guys can hear it. Joe, give me the thumbs up if you can hear the sound.
Nope.
As je hem dus, weet je, als je hem dus voor quoi. Haishkwa Kwanzaa na Techo Lekwungen Tanuk, Haishka Siem Naquilia. That's a typical welcome of Lekwungen people. And when we welcome people to our traditional territory, that's a land of smoked herring. And our ancestors, I guess, lived, hunted, and harvested land since time immemorial. And this reserve here is actually the second, I guess, reserve of our people. It used to be right down in the harbor of Victoria at one time. I think land-based learning was it's a school term, but land-based learning is actually part of our lifestyle. It's part of our values as people. And at one time, it was extremely important for us to learn, the ways of our ancestors and how to hunt and fish and harvest the land. And I think it's important for young people to have some kind of foundation, even if it's the values and the of the learning of the ways, of our ancestors and how it differs today, and compared with what they have now. I think it's important life skill, and that's it was just taken for granted when I was growing up, that we went hunting ducks and we went fishing and we experienced all of that, and not as a part of school type of thing, but just the way of life. That's what we did. Well, I guess when I started off, I used a typical welcome of Lekwungen people, and and we were welcoming people. We there's diversity not only in First Nation people, but in people in general in the Victoria area. And a lot of people don't really appreciate the fact that this territory was Lekwungen territory, or understand what Lekwungen means, because we were known as Songhees before, which is a anglicized term for one of our words. Well, in our culture, when we were being taught by an elder from Saanich, that it was important to acknowledge that the language attached to the teachings and the teaching is attached to the land. And you have to learn all those three and how they're attached. And of course, language in our longhouses is the only thing used. And we learn to understand the language of the big house and I guess what ceremony's been carried out and what's going to be done in the big house. I think they have to, express the respect for the land and everything around you, and how to appreciate not only the biosystems but the the ecology and the environment. There has to be appreciation of that. And in today's world, it's really hard to express that because the young people are brought up differently than we were. We had a great appreciation for land and what was provided around us naturally, and that's not really part of young people's learning this day.
Hmm. Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to stop share there. So I just wanted to let you guys know that at the same time, or shortly after we went and interviewed Butch for this piece, we also went to Marianne Thomas, Esquimalt Nation elder, and interviewed her as well. And John Hamlin and I, we were editing the work, and we were trying to put the two interviews together, and it just didn't feel right because we felt like we were taking a lot more away from Marianne's message. She speaks very cyclically, and so her interview was about an hour, and as opposed to Butch's, which was about 5 minutes. And so I just didn't feel right about chopping Marianne's up into a nice little package for this presentation. So we'll have Marianne's video, hopefully almost in its entirety, for a resource on our website at some point when we can get to that. But that will also be there. I thought it was really important to have um, inclusion of both the local nations, as well as the balance of the male and female. And Marianne's interview was right by the ocean, which was beautiful. So we had the land and ocean as well. So just want to make a special note of that, to keep an eye on the website for that next video. And I will pass it over to Joanne.
So this self-location exercise is something that I developed to deliver to classrooms through the years, and also at staff pro-Ds. And the land acknowledgement is a protocol that's traditional in, pretty much anywhere you go across Canada, people will acknowledge the land that they're on. Self-location is another common protocol, and it's a deeper look at who you are. So as an example of a deeper self-location, I'll tell you that a little bit more about myself. So I said I was born in North Bay, Ontario, which is the traditional territory of the Nipissing First Nation, which is where my grandmother came from. My grandfather on my father's side came from the Algonquin Nation, the Pedagogy First Nations. And my grandfather joined the army when he was a teenager, old enough to do so. And by doing that, he was disenfranchised. He had to give up his status. So then was no longer considered a member of the Kabeawak First Nations. When he married my grandmother, she then lost her status as a Nipissing First Nations woman because that was the Canadian law. And so my grandparents raised their family off reserve. And so I was born and raised off reserve in North Bay, Ontario. And the Nipissing Nation is very similar to how the Songhees and Lekwungen speaking peoples nation is right there in the edge of town. So we were very connected to the Nipissing Nation, but we didn't live on reserve. And that's an identity that you would state, because when I'm locating myself to people, they need to know what my relationship is to what my identity says about me. I don't have the experience of living on reserve, and that's why. My father was reinstated under the Bill C-31 Act of the Indian Act, and that was in the mid-'80s. And so then, our relationship to those communities became different. You'll often have people will sometimes locate themselves as to where they're at in their family. I'm the sixth of 9 kids, for example. Sometimes they locate themselves to, when they moved to a certain place. So I've lived out here for 35 years. I think it was the brutal winters and the mosquitoes that chased me into a more pleasant climate. And I fell in love with Vancouver Island and had to get to know what that means. So in this exercise that we're going to do together, we'll do breakout rooms, and we're going to ask you to just have a chat with each other about, what is your ancestral background? What do you know about it? What do you know about when your family came to Canada, or why your family came to Canada, and whether or not you've ever visited your ancestral homelands? So this is your chance to locate yourselves to your coworkers. And we'll take about, I think we said 15 minutes, John?
Yep. Yep, so I'm putting you into breakout rooms of 3 to 4 participants, and I'm going to set the timer for 15 minutes, and there will be a 60-second countdown. Hello, welcome back. I see some of you are out of your breakout rooms. I hope that was enough time, not too much. Hopefully no awkward silences. I know that some people...
It was really good. It was really good, John.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear that. And normally what we would do is, you know, in a circle, we would all share, or if it was a smaller group, we might report out. But with this big of a group, that could eat up all of our time. So Joanne will take us through the next step of the activity.
Hmm.
But we'll just wait for, I think there's still 24 seconds or something on the clock. So some people might be wanting to use all of their time.
Well, because my glasses don't work very well, I thought we were done 3 minutes ago. Let's try to rush us to the end.
No worries. Looks like we're getting close now. Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. So when I do this exercise, you know, I'm usually writing the names on the board. You know, I'll have the kids or staff or whoever just call out their ancestral backgrounds, and we'll just start populating the board with all of these countries. And, you know, we often have a map there so we can point to the different places on the map. You know, often point out that Canada, United States, you know, Australia, these are colonized spaces. They have, you know, the indigenous populations have been dispossessed in those countries, and you know, an imposed system is in place. And on the next page, the next slide, this is sort of an example of what we would see on the board. You know, there's and this is just, you know, a smattering. But you know, if you ever did this exercise with your kids, then you would see that you know, you get this beautiful multicultural expression on your board. And the next slide is when we also break down the components of culture. So we will often pick one of those ancestries, break down the cultural components, and really just break it down as much as we can, even getting to the point where you're talking about the smells of your ancestral homeland are different than they are here. Your spices that you use, the plants that you use, the flowers that you smell, you know, you know, for those of us, or those of you who have traveled to ancestral homelands, will know that there's something about that, something about being able to be in a space where your history lives, where your language is spoken, where people look like you, where your museums live, you know, your history, your art, your architecture, all of those cultural expressions are so very important. And so, where am I now? The next slide, which is my last slide, is to bring home the point that Lekwungen culture exists nowhere else on the planet. Whereas if I want to go and connect with my Italian ancestry, I can go to Italy. Lekwungen culture lives here. And a lot of people think that this is, that Lekwungen culture is in the past, it's history. It's not. It lives here. It has always lived here. It will always live here. And when you break down all of the components of culture, you know, it's always really interesting how many kids will point out all of the cultural components of Lekwungen culture. They know, they'll talk to you about totem poles and about salmon and about, you know, baskets and cedar, and they've all been through the museum, the programs through the museums, and that, you know, they have, it's a really great exercise to do with people. But culture exists on a land base, and the Lekwungen land base is right here. It's nowhere else on the planet. And so, these are the kinds of this exercise is just a reminder for kids and for staff and for all of us that we are our commonality is that we live in the Lekwungen territory. And what Butch's point was in the slide that John pointed out, one of his quotes was, the best thing you can do is find out everything you can about what that means to be Lekwungen. And this is just a quote from one of our heroes, Senator Murray Sinclair. Reconciliation is about forging and maintaining respectful relations, and there are no shortcuts.
Good words. Really good words.
We have 21 minutes left, John.
We have 28 minutes left.
28?
28. Yeah.
Okay.
But thank you, though. So healing. So we're taking you through the three parts of this presentation is territory, is location, and is healing. So we're on the last leg here. And if colonization is fundamentally about dispossessing Indigenous peoples from land, decolonization must involve forms of education that reconnect Indigenous peoples to the land and the social relations, knowledges, and languages that arise from the land. This is a quote from Matthew Wildcat, and I love it because it really speaks to the work that we do in land-based learning, in Indigenous education, and why we do it. So I'm going to show you a video, and this one is also linked on our website. I tried to embed it on the presentation several times, but I could not figure it out. So I just have to click on the link. But I just want to preface this video a little bit. This is a video of Cheryl Bryce. She's a Lekwungen knowledge holder, and she's Songhees, and she's done extensive work around traditional land uses and management, including trees, plants, medicines, and particularly Kwetlau or camas. And some of you may be familiar with that in Beacon Hill Park or other areas of the region. And I've been on a few walks with Cheryl, and she's always amazing. She brings so much life to culture. Like Joanne said, it's not stuck in time. It's alive and it's breathing, and she brings that. And the work that she does around restoration, and particularly a phrase that sticks out for me on our walks is she talks about restoration in terms of decolonizing the land. So she'll point out a piece of or a patch of ivy that's swirling up a big tree, a big Douglas fir or something, and it'll be choking out that tree, and she'll go and snip the roots to the ivy and leave them hanging there, and she'll say, that's my act of decolonizing the land. And so when we think about restoration work, it very much is a decolonizing process. We look at the invasive species like the Himalayan blackberry and the ivy and others that are, really outcompeting the native species for room. And so I'll give some examples around restoration projects, but we're just going to go through and look at this video quickly.
Traditional plants are essential to the health and wellness of every Indigenous community. Here in southern Vancouver Island, the camas plant is more than a valuable food resource. As Cheryl Bryce explains, it has both a cultural and social role in Coast Salish communities.
Camas was our role as Lekwungen women to harvest camas, and those are things that went with your family. Your family would be known to harvest these areas or known to harvest plants or certain foods. I've been harvesting since I've been a little girl. My grandma married into Lekwungen. She's Hulkaminam, so we would harvest all over the island. All kinds of traditional foods, including camas, which we're here today to talk about. So I've been harvesting even here in Megan, which is known now today as Beacon Hill Park. I guess I was raised just with a lot of our traditional foods, and to me it's really important that it's there for the future. And as Lekwungen, I want to reinstate my role as a Lekwungen in managing these ecosystems, including the Garryoke ecosystems, and encouraging others to do the same, to reinstate their roles and to reinstate the landscape and to reinstate the traditional foods and our right to food sovereignty. Camas is a part of many things. It's a part of who we are. It's a part of our identity as Lekwungen women. It's our interaction and connection to the land. And I think it's important for that, for the identity, but also our well-being, our health. The camas is just one of many of our traditional foods within the Garryoke ecosystem. It's one of the main foods. It was one of the foods that people came from all over, First Nations from up the coast and down the coast, to trade for camas. And it was a huge time to celebrate the food when we would trade. And this was the women's role to do, and it was theirs to trade. When I'm harvesting, I pull back the soil, and I'll harvest the bulbs that I'd like to harvest and put the seeds into the soil, back into the soil when I'm done. It is really depleted over the past 150 years, and it's been encroached by development, lack of management, invasive species. There's a lot of impacts to the Garryoke ecosystem. We would come here really early in the morning, and we would go all over for bark off of the trees, but this was one spot we came because it was getting harder and harder to find certain barks. And so we came here really early in the morning, just before the sunrise, thinking no one would be around, and walking in with knives to strip the bark, just being caught by somebody who was up early jogging. They were totally startled to see these Indian women coming through the park with knives. So that's one of my memories here of Megan. There's some Nootka rose and snowberry. Those are the shrubs that you find usually buffering where camas meadows are. So you could use that for a tea. The struggles that we've went through in this modern time to continually have an ongoing connection to our homelands, but also to our traditional foods. I can imagine my grandma's time and how much that would have been so heartbreaking for her to have to come into places like this and worry about being caught harvesting our traditional food or traditional teas or medicines. Here we go. Here's one, it's pretty small. It looks like it's been split before. See how it has that kind of that look like an onion, eh? I guess it was about 10 years ago I started realizing that I need to be more public about what I'm doing and sharing that with not just my family, but other First Nations and non-First Nations. So it was more creating an awareness, going out to the schools, talking about the importance, like it's not just a history, it's not something you read in the museum, it's not something you go and look at. This is who we are. I bring my family here, my nephews, my nieces, I bring them all over our homelands and we harvest. I'm finding more of the younger generation is stepping up and taking more of an interest. Well, it's easy to go to the grocery store and buy some potatoes and onions, and it's a lot easier than going out and managing systems. I think that's a big part of it, is taking on your role in the community as First Nations, as Lekwungen, is really important. And what your family would know and have harvesting places to go, I think it's really important for everyone to ensure that they have that on a regular basis, whether it's harvesting camas or clams or hunting, whatever those food resources that their family was known to go and get and to harvest. Is important that they maintain those roles and pass that down and protect the areas that they utilize for those food resources. And food, it's part of our food sovereignty, and it's a part of who we are, and it's a part of our future. And I think it's really important that we actively get involved, not only in doing the harvesting, but protecting those sites.
Join us next.
Okay. So Cheryl just has such an eloquent way of speaking to all of the points that we bring up, but that, Lekwungen isn't just in a museum to go and look at. Some other key takeaways for me from that is around camas being depleted due to encroachment from development, lack of management, and invasive species. She talks about food sovereignty and how important it is for their future. And she talks about getting actively involved, not just in harvesting, but protecting sites. And she's not just speaking to Lekwungen people as well. She's speaking, to people, of this region. And I love, she tells this story of when the Bear Mountain excavation was happening, when they were putting in the hotel and development site up there. And she was active up there, blockading, standing in front of, big bulldozers and machines to protect sacred sites from being bulldozed. And you can just see how passionate and how strongly she believes in the maintenance of these cultural traditions, and how important it is to her to see these continue with the younger generation. So my next slide, this is Earlaxton Jr, and he's one of the elders on our Elders Advisory Council. He's a Wasanic elder from Sachem, and really honored to have him on the council. And we were talking about this workshop on Friday at our last Elders Advisory Council meeting, and I showed the video with Butch, and I guess Earl felt inspired because he wanted to share some thoughts on land-based learning as well. So he sent me this beautiful message, and I asked if it was okay to share, and he said he would be delighted. So Earl's been instrumental in restoration work around the region, and in his work with Papekanot, that's the blossoming place that translates, and it's the Native Plants and Garden Education Program at the Lowell Tribal School in Saanich. I've been out there a few times to visit Earl in Papekanot, and it's amazing to see, those cultural, traditions carried on through an elder, and see the excitement of the young ones as they learn not only the plants and things, but also the language and the stories and the teachings that are attached to those things. So he sent me this email, and he said, I think that land-based learning is very important for First Nations. We've been here on this land for a very long time. We have a lot of untapped knowledge. It is only in recent times that we are starting to be asked about it. My dad, Dr. Earlaxton Sr, said, we know where our territory is because we have a name for it. And it's a special meaning and has a story attached to it that explains why it's called that. And I'll give you an example of that in just a minute. So here's some notable examples of restoration work that's happening around the region. You can see in the bottom left here, we have the Garryoak ecosystem at Beacon Hill Park at Megan. So there's talks about Beacon Hill involving restoration of the park's Garryoak meadows based on pre-colonial references, including the reintroduction of historic species such as the western bluebird and Taylor's checker spot butterfly. The top right here is restoration of Sneedquith. And this is a little teaching that Earl shared with me. He said, Sneedquith, meaning the place of blue grouse, or in English, Todd Inlet. He says it's the first village site of the Saanich. Blue grouse like to roost in the branches of the trees, and there was so much blue grouse there that they filled all the branches of all the trees down to the lowest branches. It's very powerful to speak at these places. I love that. And then the bottom right, this is actually from right out front of the Esquimalt Nation band office. So a few years ago, there was a big diesel spill in the Plumper Bay there, and it really decimated the community. This bay was used for all sorts of things like canoe pulling. People would go crabbing in the bay. And after the remediation work, it was never fully remediated. And so we're actually looking to partner with Esquimalt Nation and UVic and the CRD to explore further remediation of the bay and the soils underneath the water that are no longer good for growing clams because of the hydrocarbons in the diesel. And also looking to explore some youth stewardship opportunities. So looking at a youth guardian program, how do we get youth involved in stewardship of the land and educating the public on land uses and things of that nature is so important to bridge that generational teaching with the youth. Some other notable examples of restoration work around the region are things like the Boker Creek restoration and chum salmon recovery, the Friends of Boker Creek, Oak Bay High, UVic. I was part of the meetings over the summer to see these chum salmon released into the stream, which hasn't seen salmon for about 100 years. And so that's kind of exciting to think that there may be a chum salmon run there one day. Teaching that was passed on to me, from my elders was that when you heal the land, you're healing yourself and your relationships. And that's something that I take, very seriously, that when we go out and we do restoration work, whether it be pulling invasive species or more extensive remediation work like hydrocarbons in water and subwater soil, it's all impactful. It all matters. And it can be an act of reconciliation as well. And finally, just the gorge waterway monitoring and restoration. And then I guess if you think about it, the Victoria sewage treatment plant is another form of ecocultural restoration, in a sense that we'll no longer be pumping raw sewage into the ocean, which is pretty amazing. So I think of Butch's video kind of like a moral obligation to provide land-based learning opportunities for youth, but we also have a contractual obligation, and this comes in the form of our local education agreement. This is an example from our education agreement with Songhees, and we're currently in negotiations with Esquimalt Nation to establish their local education agreement. But essentially what it is a contract between our school district and the nations on how we're going to provide education for not only their students, but students in general in this territory. And I love this, that the parties agreed to implement the BC curriculum as revised to integrate First Peoples principles of learning, authentic Indigenous resources, diverse learning experiences, including land-based education and traditional ecological knowledge. So if we're doing this work, then we're really doing right by the desire and the wishes of the local nations. And so I always take great pride in that when we can, provide those opportunities for youth, it goes a long, long way. So some of you may be asking, where do we start? I oftentimes will just spend hours redirecting requests and teachers to resources that I've used or that I have vetted or I know are really good resources. And so here's a list of them, and we'll just take a few minutes to go through. But I included quite a few quotes in the presentation, and I didn't want everybody else to have the fun, so I wanted to include a quote of my own. And here it is. Land-based teaching requires an understanding of and appreciation for the history of place and for our individual relationship to that history. It is reflective and reflexive, inquiry-based and experiential, relational and reciprocal, and certainly some of the most profound teaching and learning that I've ever been a part of. So that's really sums it up for me. Why do I do it? Because of all those reasons. Why should we do it? You need to figure that out for yourself, I suppose. But here's a list of resources to help you do that. So this is just the Indigenous Education Department website. Lists of resources here, teacher resources, elementary, middle, secondary, Orange Shirt Day, the list goes on. And that extends into our library because some of our resources are hard copies. And so that's always a good one to start with. I don't know how many of you have just gone to the local nations websites and poked around. There's all kinds of really great stuff on there. Esquimalt Nation website, Songhees Nation website, Really great resources, great teaching materials, updates on restoration work or how you can get involved oftentimes. This is a resource that I drew some of my quotes from. I really love this. This is the one around Papakenout and the work with Earlaxton Jr. and the Llewellyn Tribal School. So you can go on and check that out a bit more. This is the site for the territorial acknowledgments and welcomes from Camosun. It's a really excellent website as well. This is a really great one. I often point teachers to if they want to do some walking tours around the region. So this is the Lekwungen, 7 Signs of Lekwungen. They were all carvings done by Butch Dix, Spindlewhorl Designs, which is a very Coast Salish art form. And they were all cast into bronze statues and placed at particularly cultural spots of significance around the region. So you can see here that they're all numbered, and all schools in our district are pretty close within distance of most of these. And so if you're able to get out and check out 1 or 2 of those, or I encourage you at some point to go out and see all of them with your students when it's safe to do so. But they have really good teaching and learning pieces in there and why they're significant culturally, that site. This is a resource for teachers that Joanne drew from a little bit for this presentation. Did you want to speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, that's part of a professional learning series that was put out by BC Campus with a lot of, it's for post-secondary, but there's a lot of information that can be drawn out of that. This one is for teachers and instructors, but they also have a guide for frontline staff, advisors, and student services, one for leaders and administrators, curriculum developers, and researchers. And they're all free, they're all online, and they're all vetted by a really great team of Indigenous academics. So lots of good learning in there.
Obviously, FINESC is a huge one. We go here all the time for stuff. All their work is done with community consultation, with high research standards, and it's always a go-to. And they just have so many resources in so many different areas that guide curriculum. So I would always encourage teachers to go check this one out anytime you're looking for something that we don't have. And then this is the Living Lab Project. This is a network of partnerships with UVic and IED and some various non-governmental organizations around the region, like World Fisheries Trust and others, to bring education and opportunities for youth to do activities that maybe they wouldn't normally get to. So this is an excellent partnership that I'm really excited to be a part of, and providing on the ground opportunities for youth and educational resources for teachers. And that's it. But just wait. Don't leave me yet, because normally what I do is door prizes at the beginning, but I wanted to see who was gonna stay. So you guys all got your free ticket into the door prize draw. Congratulations. Thank you for coming. We have a couple of questions that we're going to ask the group, and whoever types the first correct answer into the chat will win both a coveted book, The Inconvenient Indian, and what's inside of that, Joanne? A $10 gift card. Holy smokes. Okay, so here we go. Get your typing fingers ready. I am going to ask the question in 3 seconds. So get your typing fingers out. So, what are the 4 WSÁNEĆ nations?
Those are the 4 bands on the Saanich Peninsula.
Yes, it's a tough question, I know, but we really wanted to the weed out the fakers from the know-it-alls here. So oh, good guesses, good guesses. No, I'm seeing some of them in there. No.
Oh, there it is, Rebecca.
Oh yeah, Rebecca, nice job. Sekum, Sartlet, Pakwachin, and Sayout. Well done, Rebecca. You've won yourself a coveted Inconvenient Indian book and a $10 gift card. Congratulations. Okay, Rebecca, if you could just email us your contact, what school you're at. I'm not sure what Rebecca you are, because I know some Rebeccas, but email us and we will get that to you. We'll send it in the school mail. Okay, the next question is, are you ready? What are the 3 island nations? Close. I see 2. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we'll take that. We'll take that. Jennifer Adamson. Congratulations.
I can never spell. I can say it, Kokakua.
Yeah, we will take it. So there are the Kokwakiwak, the New Channel, and the Coast Salish. Well done, Jennifer. You've won yourself a coveted book and $10 gift card. Okay, well, Joanne, did you want to come up with one more, or is that good for today?
We'll just randomly choose somebody and send it off.
Okay, we're gonna choose. We're gonna choose one.
Something?
Yep.
I just want to really thank you for yours and Joanne's presentation today. It was awesome. I just want to say that, you know, it's when I think of land-based, it's also water-based learning for our Indigenous territories as well, and that it's so important not only for ourselves as professionals and as adults, and to share this knowledge and information with our youth, our students, but also for to share it with our grandkids, because if we don't have healthy lands and healthy waterways, it's going to impact our children and our grandchildren and the next generation unborn, generations unborn. So that's how important this in-service is today. So thank you for your wonderful work today.
Haichka, thank you so much, Paul, for those good words to close out our circle today. It's always about the next generation, and that's, if we're always thinking that, then we're going to be on the right track. Haichka, thank you all so much for coming. We will draw one of you randomly and send off the 3rd coveted book and gift card your way. And take care of each other, and enjoy the rest of your week and month, and looking forward to spring break. Haichka Siam.
Miigwech.
So much. That was amazing.
Oop.